Can I just say, on behalf of all of us here, it's just a rich privilege to have you do this. We all go to celebrations where often it's another family member, not the closest. Hearing from you only brings Malcolm that much closer. So my friend, please.
Okay. Oh my goodness, I'm going to be crying before you get started. It's terrible. This is my chance to talk about my husband. Like Scott said, in a lot of places, at the funeral, the pastor talked, and other people have spoken, but this is my chance to talk. So thank you very much for, I don't know what a eulogy is or a homily, so I'm just going to say what I got to say. What God put on my heart, and I pray it is a blessing for you as he was for me. First of all, I just want to begin by saying thank you for your commitment and participation in this memorial service on behalf of Malcolm. I am still sorting it all out in my heart. Whether you've been part of our story since our early days at Grandview here at Lake Avenue, or whether you've joined the crew of faithful supporters at some point along the way, your friendship, prayers, and care for the Collins clan over the years has been an incredible witness to God's faithfulness. I am grateful, and I'm sure Malcolm would say, as he always said, we have not stopped giving thanks for you, remembering you in our prayers. Over the last year, as our family tried to figure out how to support Malcolm through the decline, we did a lot of remembering and reflecting. Although Malcolm's ability to respond and engage verbally diminished rapidly, he didn't talk really for the last year and a half. I chose to hold on to the truth that the core of who he was there. He always appreciated remembering the stories of God's faithfulness and tracking the many surprising and deep ways God continued to guide and care for him through all the ups and downs of life. When he moved into the memory care unit at Superior, I visited him every day, read from his daily life, sometimes played Uno with friends, and often we watched reruns of a favorite show on Netflix. I have them all memorized. We watched the same show. Although his voice was soft, and it wasn't always clear what he remembered from day to day, he maintained his core person. When it became clear that it was time to formalize the liturgy, readings, and songs that would witness to Malcolm's life and faith, we found a document that Malcolm had prepared and saved on his computer that listed the scripture readings he wanted to read at his funeral. I don't know how it's done here, but in the Lutheran tradition, it's common to read the story of Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead at funerals. This story points to the promise of resurrection and hope that helps us move through the grief and tears of death. But Malcolm had chosen a different passage that, as we wrestled with it, and as I have reflected on it since, I think reflects a key part of his experience of healing and grace that informed so much about how he approached others. I know that Scott is going to share a more formal homily in a bit, so I will spare a second sermon. I don't think this is a sermon.
Hopefully not.
Malcolm's faith was such a central part of who he was. I don't think I can reflect on his life without pondering that how I think the story he chose for the gospel reading at his funeral informed his life. Luke tells the story of Jesus being invited to the home of a Pharisee for a dinner party that is interrupted by the arrival of a woman who is merely identified as a sinner. This woman pours expensive oil on Jesus' feet and wipes his feet with her hair and tears. Rather than condemning her, like the dinner party expected, Jesus commends this woman for her faith and sends her out with peace. It's an interesting passage it's an interesting passage to use in a funeral text. But as the kids and I have sat with this story in connection with Malcolm's life, It makes sense to us that he resonated with the deep grace and forgiveness demonstrated by Jesus to this woman. Malcolm often framed his life narrative through the story of two holes. One was a physical hole he fell in at age 2, wandering with their milk goat. Malcolm was adopted as the result of both his birth mother's unwanted pregnancy and his parents' inability to have kids. Falling into the hole and being found was often used to represent the feeling he didn't always know how to articulate of being an unwanted product of sin's impact on lives, and yet so blessed by community. His parents adopted him into the rich history and legacy of his family's missionary life in Kenya. The second hole was a metaphorical hole he fell into when he left Kenya after high school graduation and tried to find his way at Westmont College in Santa Barbara. Within the first week of his freshman year, his entry into the United States, he got word by phone that his dad had died, and he stood unknown and invisible on the beach in Santa Barbara. In response to that and other layers of grief and cultural transition he was navigating, he found comfort in a relationship that was not healthy or whole, and he fell into a season of spiritual darkness and brokenness. He heard Pastor Ray Ortland speak at Westmont Chapel and eventually became part of Lake Avenue. You guys helped rescue him from this hole. As he experienced healing through relationships, community, and the invitation into forgiveness and grace of Jesus. So when I read the story of the woman washing Jesus' feet through Malcolm's story of the two holes, I see the connection. He experienced the love and forgiveness Jesus extended to that woman who was a sinner. He didn't have a dramatic conversion story or a dramatic sending story like Paul or Moses. His experience of Jesus was much more gentle, more relational, but equally transformative in his own quiet way. He didn't approach his ministry or his interaction with others with a magnetic personality, social confidence, or academic brilliance. He approached people with humility and maybe even from the shame and self-judgment of his own brokenness, but convinced that just as Jesus demonstrated love and grace towards that woman in Luke's gospel, Jesus wanted others to know the great big love of Jesus. If I remember the story right, and I think there's people here that know, it was during that time that 8 guys started a Bible study and became the original core of the grad group in the early 70s at Lake Avenue. Since then, those friends from the grad group that then formed Bereans and our friends from Salem have faithfully supported us. Salem and Lake were instrumental in healing wounds and encouraging us to consider going to Kenya with African Inland Mission, AIM, to do Bible translation with the Rendille tribe. At the end of that first term on the field, the elders they walked with us and had us look at the children in the village playing, and they sent us back to Lake and Salem with a thank you. We are alive because of you. The New Testament is translated and dedicated. Pastors have been trained, and Rendille has been taken off the list of unreached peoples. Thank you, thank you, thank you for making it possible. Our family grew from baby Sean to 5 kids under the age of 6, and those translation days. Salem grew to 13, financed a goat, and did a chili dinner for a matching grant with Thriving for a bigger car. This man headed it up. Bereans met us with a stocked pantry. Grocery shopping in Vons was beyond me, and we had 3 young ones. You pasted us back together when we came home, drained from famine, disease, and danger. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We then had to move to Nairobi when our son Greg got sick with juvenile rheumatoid arthritis. Your prayers and support sustained us as we were invited to join the staff team that was beginning the missionary training college. The vision was to equip African pastors and their families for cross-cultural ministry within the African context. The missionary college was on the frontier of rethinking the whole approach to missions as the Kenyan church matured and took on its own leadership and vision for outreach. Malcolm was part of that strategizing. He appreciated uncovering the spark of the Jesus story in the variety of languages and cultures throughout East Africa. Malcolm became the academic dean of that new venture. In 1995, Malcolm transferred to the personnel office in the Africa Inland Church Central Office, working with their bishop in Nairobi, and walked alongside the national church. He was a faithful member of the cheering squad for those Kenyan leaders figuring out how to do and how to be church. He was also close enough to enjoy cheering our kids as they found their way through sports, academics, and social life at Rift Valley Academy. He supported me as I tried to find my own voice and place in the mission field, working with women and refugees. As Sean was graduating from high school and coming back to the United States for college, Malcolm was open to the idea of adoption. 2 more were added to our family. Whether it was befriending the men who guarded our compound as security guards, learning to greet cashiers and store owners with words in their own language, sharing whatever he could with those who came to the door asking for food or resources, or being willing to go out of the way to give a ride to someone, Malcolm demonstrated the generosity and outpouring of love that the women in the text showed Jesus. But he did it in his own unassuming, quiet, and yes, sometimes stubborn way. Fuller School of World Mission awarded Malcolm the 1,000th Diploma Award when he received his Master's in Missiology, as they felt he embodied the vision of missions. As the 90s approached, life became much more chaotic. In the Central AIC, African Inland Church office, Malcolm laid his time between the 14 international mission groups feeding into the Africa Inland Church to do mission work from various countries with their own philosophies of how to do church growth. It'd be like the Germans telling Lake Avenue how to do church, along with the Koreans, along with the Finns, along with the, everybody had their idea because Kenya was a target country. It was on a committee to try and bring some sort of uniform expectations or language for what a diploma or degree meant from this or that school, and how it stood in relationship to the one seminary and several official Bible schools already existing under the church. In 1997, though, Malcolm was called back to be the principal of the missionary college that was floundering. He accepted the challenge and was handed a school in debt, with no money and no students. For one term, we organized our resources, paid debts, brought back staff, and got Ray and Jill Davis of Lake Avenue to join us on staff. As I remember, at one point, we then had 28 students with no common language. They came from Chad to the north, Zaire to the west, Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, Korea, Madagascar, and Zambia. It was possible because of the fluidity of Malcolm's cross-culturalness. The world of missions again went into transition. Western churches were developing relationships with African pastors who were now speaking more English, and a movement to empower African missionaries bypassing the Western missionary was forming. The missionary college birthed a missionary agency, and graduates of the college returned to their countries to form mission agencies and training programs. Meanwhile, our own family, on our family front, our 3 remaining parents died, 2 sons married, and the 4 remaining birth children returned to the United States for college. Our 2 adopted children found themselves coming to the States, to Lake Avenue and to Salem, to face repurposing our lives. Not unlike the scenes in Lion King, Our lives felt like the state of affairs under Scar's disastrous reign, a real fixer-upper. That's how we saw it. Our lives felt just as topsy-turvy. We returned to Lake and Salem. We returned to people who loved much and had carried our stories for us. You guys still believed in us. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. When we left Kenya in 2001, Lake and Salem sent us again to a different mission field. We went to Minneapolis to work with Somalis who were in the same language group as the original Rendili Dream. Malcolm continued to share the love of Jesus with East Africans and other immigrants in Minneapolis. He was not a preacher or an evangelist, but he spent hours in conversation with men at the taxi cab depot over cups of tea, or in the car giving rides to people, or in the waiting room with people trying to navigate various American systems. He befriended the neighbors while walking our dog and shared the suffering of others by running marathons carrying the Somali flag to raise awareness of Somali refugees, and by joining community conversations about safety and housing concerns. He was supposed to learn Somali or teach English, but really didn't do either, because he loved chatting in Swahili. Even from the wheelchair in Florida, he tried to join the men's Bible study and fellowship at the last church we were part of in Indianapolis. And we faithfully tuned in on Zoom to Lake Avenue and said, "Oh, there's some family, oh, there's some guys who know." He recognized people and faces and was delighted. One of our family's favorite Disney movies is The Lion King. It's not just a cute movie that resonates with our Africanness, but it has some really great lines that still show up in our family vocabulary. One of the favorites is when the Liboni, the guy who's kind of spiritual, the Holy Spirit, hits Simba over the head, and Simba says, "Ouch, that hurt." And the Holy Spirit says, "Yes, the past does hurt, but the way I see it, you learn from it or you run from it." We say that to each other all the time. It's a story of a young lion who witnesses tragedy and internalizes personal responsibility for that tragedy. He leaves the safety of his community and runs into the surprising fellowship with a warthog and a meerkat, who help him rediscover his joy of life. When he is challenged to face his past for the sake of the healing of his loved ones, he is able to return and step fully into who he was always meant to be. In many ways, that was Malcolm's life. The circumstances around his birth convinced him he was an outcast and deserving of judgment. But as he stumbled through the challenges and celebrations of life, supported by Lake Avenue in Salem, he somehow had a way of connecting with people, regardless of their quirks and uniqueness. They loved him and showed him grace, and he loved them. Salem and Lake loved him and showed him grace. He was able, in his own way, to see others beyond their pain and shame and show them the love and affirmation he had experienced in his own encounter with grace. As I have wrestled with the grief of Malcolm's passing, and have tried to find the spiritual language and imagery to help me articulate and hold on to the promises of God that can help me find some solid ground for myself in this new season. I come back to this passage that Malcolm wanted read at his funeral. I imagine Malcolm approaching the feet of Jesus, feeling unqualified and uncertain, and feeling the criticism and judgment of others. But compelled by gratitude, he sought to share whatever he had with those around him. And I imagine Jesus seeing him, not as a broken and sinful person, but as beloved and forgiven. I suspect Jesus reached down and lifted Malcolm up, restoring him to wholeness that filled in the caverns of the two holes that had so long defined him. And like Simba, at the end of the movie Lion King, Malcolm is finally able to step fully into claiming and recognizing the fullness and love of who he is. His past is healed. His body is restored, and he now knows fully what he knew only in part, the great big love of Jesus. Thank you.
Amen.
Thank you, Barbara, for beautiful storytelling. And if you're all like me, you had some snapshots that were not on screen that went by because of things she said. Moments. Thank you. And thank you for letting us in on some things that, a lot of things that many of us here did not see, did not know because of the different chapters we all enter in people's lives. Thank you.